as most people, grew up in the Pep Guardiola Barcelona era and started on my positional model journey. And I've got to make my own version of a positional model. It just seemed like I was slowing down the progression of each individual I was working with. I feel like there's too much emphasis on positional superiority. The game is tactical, isn't it? It's end to end. What are our superiorities compared to theirs? How do we win the game? And I think that's what we should be looking at, as opposed to just one superiority. And I think if we take tactics away from positional and quantitative, and we start looking at all the superiorities, and we keep finding new ones and stuff, basically anything's possible. For me, it shouldn't be a short passing game or a long passing game. It should be everything.
Hello coaches, welcome back to another Modern Soccer Coach podcast interview. There's been a lot of talk in the last week or two about robotic football. We have covered this topic for at least a couple of years, but we've never covered it from this angle. This week we are joined by Jake Pickles, former Premier League academy coach at Brighton, Crystal Palace and Southampton. He's now based in the US. He's written extensively about a lot of topics, technique in football, and this article that caught my eye, how the thirds of play model impacts creativity and decision making in youth football in particular. I really wanted to get him on and talk about it and discuss it in depth. I'll put the link of the article in the description and in the comments as well, and I would definitely recommend that you give it a read. This is a brilliant discussion. I loved it. Please make sure you like, please make sure you subscribe, please make sure you share it with your coaching community, and please give us your opinion in the comments as well. What do you think about this topic? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks so much for the support. Here is Jake. Enjoy. Jake, thanks so much for joining me for the Modern Soccer Coach podcast. Really excited to chat.
Yeah, it's good to be here, Gary. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
This topic is going to get a lot of people interested. So you wrote an article, how thirds of play impact creativity and football development. It obviously got me thinking, because I am a proponent of third models, but always open to having my thoughts challenged. And it definitely did this. And even before we started recording, I was like, still thinking about this. My mind's gone a lot of places. I think it's a brilliant topic. So let's go there. I want to start with where your inspiration from the article came, and when and how long you felt that the issues are here with these thirds models.
It's a tough one, really, because I think when you're growing as a coach, when you start as a coach, my inspirations are wildly different then to what they are now. So when I was sort of beginning as a coach and working up through some academies in the south of England, I was learning from those academies. So what came before them and what they were currently doing, and that was my sort of inspiration, is I've got to be at that level. Also, as most people, grew up in the Pep Guardiola Barcelona era, found it fascinating because we've never seen anything like it, and started on my positional model journey. And I've got to make my own version of a positional model, and as I probably got more experience and just met more players and more people in the game, it just seemed like I was slowing down the progression of each individual I was working with. So my main inspiration, I was working at Crystal Palace, and I had like a game model that fitted with what the club wanted, but also my own sort of tweak on it and my own version, and they were really successful. They were developing, but in South London you have, and coaches that work there will understand, there's no talents I've seen like the talents you get in South London. I mean, it's just an incredible play. The uniqueness of the players, I don't know if it can be replicated. And that's just from my personal experience. And what I found was these players were so good. I was lucky to have a really special group there that I'm sure will go on to do really well. And they were so unique and so good at what they did. They would often break my game model and do things that were just completely out of the box, but so in context of the game that it led me to learn from them. And these kids were only 11 and 12 years old, by the way. But it just led me to question what I was doing. like yeah, I built some success for them in terms of structure and how to build, and um, but they were so good that when those things broke down, they would carry it through their individual qualities, and it just made me rethink everything. And that was in my first year at Palace. I'd not worked with players like that before. Um, no disrespect to the other clubs I worked for, but it's just a different. I just got very lucky with that age group to be able to work with them for 2 years. So yeah, that's where it sort of begun really. And I started looking at, well, how do I get the best out of these players, and how do I push them, because the game models, if they're having to break the game model with their talent and the way they perceive the game, I'm doing something wrong. So where do I go next? And it was just a constant uh, conversation in my head of how to continually do that. And I'm still learning now. And the more players you meet and the more unique individuals you meet, that changes every week. And so but definitely a different concept to what I was on then, for sure.
Yeah, I think the process of questioning something and trying to prove yourself wrong, how many times the coaches spend trying to prove themselves right, that's a big starting point for me as I look at this and think that again it's got so much value just to question basically everything we're doing. And I'll put the link below for the coaches as well, and urge them to read this article. But I'm going to read a sentence out from it that really impacted me. A player's decisions shouldn't be dictated by where they are located on the pitch, but by the unfolding realities of the game itself. So if pitch position isn't the starting point or the main point, what's the alternative for teaching tactical understanding?
Yeah, what a huge question, but a fun one for sure. So where I'm at now, and I'm sure this will develop over time, is that I feel like there's too much emphasis on positional um, organization and superiority. Talk about it like that. So the game is tactical, isn't it? It's end to end. What are our superiorities compared to theirs? How do we win the game? And I think that's what we should be looking at, as opposed to just one superiority. There's other ones, aren't there? There's um, like dynamic. There's um, quantitative is the one we currently use, isn't it? Positional and quantitative. So you have players in superior positions that will take out rows of players in the game. That's the main one we look at. And then if you look at most people's positional training, most coaches' positional training, it will be you'll have extra players. So you'll have quantitative superiority. So the idea is to create positional and quantitative superiority. But what about qualitative superiority? So what if you've got an unbelievable centre midfielder who can drive through the middle of the pitch? And I always think of players like Loftus-Cheek or Kaka, or like those players were just so good at that. If you have a game model that stopped that happening, or limited them to doing it in a certain part of the pitch, I think we've got to be honest and say we're doing that player a disservice. Now, when you get to obviously elite level and you've got to win games, I'm not saying never have a game. It is different. I wouldn't do it differently still, because I'd still want the players to develop in the way that I think they could develop, and this is it. But in youth football, soccer, for me, it has to be about helping the player find who they want to be, who the best version of themselves could be on the pitch, and then pushing them into areas where they haven't been before, but still asking them to be themselves. And I think if we take tactics away from positional and quantitative, and we start looking at all the superiorities, and we keep finding new ones and stuff, basically anything's possible. It shouldn't be, for me, it shouldn't be a short passing game or a long passing game. It should be everything. There should be and the idea is to get the players to perceive everything and internalize that in their own way, and find an answer in their own way, in their own individual way. And then for the players to develop as a team, because it is a team game, it's just them understanding each other's superiorities and how they perceive the game. And that should be tactics for me. So if this player likes dropping in deep, we were talking about Italian football earlier, and the 9 coming into the 6 area, if they like doing that, a bit like Harry Kane, for example, um, then why would we stop them doing that? They feel like they can make something happen. They perceive something in the game, and it's our job to not tell them what's right or wrong, but to give them opportunities to do that in training with different situations going on and see how they adapt to that. It's not our job to stop them being themselves. I think as soon as we put in positional game models, or just game models in general, really, you're giving them answers they can choose from. But we'll never know what answers they would have chosen if we put one of those on. As soon as we put on a game model, for me, we are stopping ourselves from seeing what that player could have been. We're stopping them help reach their full potential. I just think that's really sad. I think that's it sort of dulls the game and dulls personality, and I just think that's really sad. That's not the game I grew up loving. So sort of on a crusade to change that.
Yeah, it sounds like I'm going to agree with everything you say. I promise I'm going to start disagreeing with a couple of things. But up until this, I agree 100% that this is when game models are presented, they're presented in a way that I feel as if we've almost substituted control, where again in the coach now controls, it's a control battle that now they're saying, listen, you're going to play the way I want to play, but I'm going to manipulate this in a tactical plan that has lots of detail. But it's still, you can't, but then the same thing will be, well, I'm a player-led coach. Like, well, you're not, if that, again, is a playbook that you're mapping out. Now, I do believe that at the higher levels where scouting comes in and pressure comes in and alignment from someone paying a lot of money to try and get results, I actually think the game model has a greater value at that level, where periodization, again, loads, all it's the minutiae of detail has to be right. But at the youth level, I don't think that the game model, again, there's an obsession about the overload that I've noticed in recent years, that everything is solved with an overload. And
Yeah.
Was it positional play that got us here?
I think so. I think so. And well, a specific brand of positional play.
Yeah.
There's different types. But yeah, the game isn't that, is it? And the game for me is moving. We were talking about this earlier as well, like that man-to-man game. So what now? Because it's always going to be equal. So at what point? I mean, not always, but majority of the time it's going to be equal. So if you're always training with 3 extra players, that's not representative of the dynamic flow of the game. That doesn't always happen. And and you're talking about recruitment for top teams. Like, if it was me doing it, I wouldn't recruit. I wouldn't necessarily recruit specific players for specific roles. That's still looking down on from a model first perspective. What I'd want is players that were adaptable and open-minded and creative, and then I can just have them all, and they can play whatever the game needs. If I know those players well enough, I can put them in and win a game, and the players can win the game probably and see those things. The idea for me is for the players to see what's going on in the game, not need me. If they look over to me, I'm like, right, this is what we're doing at training this week. It's got to be them figuring out the game and figuring out how to win. So yeah, I think positional play has a lot to answer for, but also so do we. We can think for ourselves. We sort of accept so many things in all aspects of life, and I think actually just get out there and just see what else is out there. It's not what you've always been told. It's not what you've always been shown. It's not what all the top clubs do that you have to follow. You can actually just think outside that, and there's a whole world out there. And that's what excites me anyway. I think there's a better way to do it for sure.
That brings us on nicely. Agreement versus alignment. Talk a little bit about. I think this is really good. Really, really good.
Well, yeah, this stems from a few of the clubs I've worked at. But the sort of rhetoric when you get to a club. I think I wrote about this specifically in the article, but it's like, here's the game model. Every team needs to look the same, because when they get to the first team, they need to know their roles. They need to know what that sort of football looks like. Well, for me, as soon as you do that, though, you're not developing those players. It changes from a player, a person, to a product. and you're fitting them into a mold. I mean, I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir of a lot of people here. I'm sure people understand before I explain. But you're putting them, you're making them into a role rather than seeing who they are and what makes them unique. And I think, I don't know, I don't know enough first team managers, but if I'm a first team manager, I want players who are unique and different and special, because I want something different. Because when you get to the top level, it just gets harder and harder and harder to break down defenses, or harder and harder and harder to stop attacks. So I need someone unique and special. I don't want someone that's part of a game model. They need to be able to adapt constantly. So we say it's alignment. That's what the clubs say. Majority of the clubs. This is alignment. Every team should look the same. They should play this style of football. But that's agreement. Agreement is, no matter what you say or who we have, we're doing this. That's not alignment. Alignment is, we're aligned in the fact that we want adaptable, creative players. It's not like a final goal. It's a ongoing process. So if you find a place that has real alignment, everyone will be aligned in trying to develop, but well, in my philosophy, through my philosophy, the best version of each individual. That would be my alignment. But to say that every team has to play a 4-2-3-1, that's agreement. It's nonsense. You know, for me, that doesn't help anyone. And also, how long do managers stay? How long do managers, if you're going for a certain game model and they're left 2 years and then a new manager comes in? I mean, that genuinely happens. And I've been at clubs where that's happened. And the manager's there and everyone's really excited to play great football, and they play a certain specific style of football, and everyone changes and plays this way. And then he goes. But now what have we now what? We've got to redo the whole game model to fit the new coach and what he wants. So really, if you're just constantly developing the individual holistically, completely from the beginning, at a certain point there'll be special and unique players that you can pick from that will hopefully be able to go through the pathway and into the first team because of their unique talents.
It's also as well, like I was even this morning listening to again something that's really for some reason fascinating me at the minute is the Ruben Amorim at United, and leadership style merging with playing style. And you know, does that also, again at the highest level, what does that look like trickle down, where again everyone's saying, well listen, needs to change it up, won't change it. Also looks to be my way or the highway with the player management style. So then you're like, okay, well the ultimate player-led coach is probably Ancelotti, who's perception-wise given a lot of freedom, flexible, but it's not held in the same. You know, sometimes Ancelotti has to say to people, listen, I know my tactics as well. So it is the problem sometimes that we feel as if also in society that we have to choose one or the other, and the intelligence is always glorified, you know, the tactical genius, that's the one that's the priority.
Yeah, it's a great question. I love Ancelotti, just to say. I think he's fantastic, and I think he's tactically excellent. You have to be to win all the stuff he's won, surely. Again, I think it's perception, or it's the perception from us as to what tactics actually are.
Yes.
Right. So we currently believe that someone's a tactician if they control what the players do. So we, again, it's very easy to pick on Pep, isn't it? But those players. Actually, the best one's Maresca at the moment. Did you see his interview recently? He spoke about it's this. I can't remember who they're speaking about. One of his centre mids, and he was asked by a journalist, "Oh, why?" Some of the fans were getting upset that they weren't passing the ball forward at certain times when they could have. And he literally sat there and said into the microphone, I couldn't believe it. And he said that he knows if he doesn't pass the ball back there, I'll take him off. And I just thought, that is wild. You can find it, it's all over the internet, but I'll send it to you later. But I just think that what our understanding of what a tactical intellectual is slightly skewed for me. I think it's important to know these positional frameworks from a coaching point of view. So it's easier to observe what the opposition are doing, where they leave spaces, etc. So you can support the players when they're not sure, like they don't know. No one's going to know everything. You have to start a conversation about that maybe in your team talks. Oh, what formation are they playing? Okay, are they staying in their positions? Okay, so where are they? So what are they leaving for you? What are they? And you're guiding them towards what you've seen. And if you can observe those tactics, those positional tactics yourself, that's easier to support the players. But this is what I believe, without knowing him, and watching him work, what Ancelotti does. Perceives, okay, they're doing this. Okay, I can lead the players to see those spaces. But what they do with those spaces is they're good enough to break that down. They're good enough to, now I know they're leaving that little space by the side of the centre midfielder or behind the centre midfielder, or they keep passing the ball back to the goalie. All right, so let's set up something where we can nick the ball off the goalie and go, So I think, yes, positional tactics, as we call them now, which are sort of taken over, important for a coach to learn because it was what the current game is. But for the future game, and specifically when you're working with developing players at any level, for me, they can't be told that is the only style of play. You have to help them perceive what the opposition is doing, and then ask them with their own strengths how they're going to break that down. Oh, so now Jack's coming on right wing. So what does he do? How can you still create an opportunity to beat this team with the spaces that they left? Now Jack's on the right wing instead of John. Like what are the differences that you'll now have you have to utilize to break that team down? So yeah, that's right. I think the individual players are your tactics. So if you don't know your individual players and you're forcing them into roles, that's where the difference is probably between what I see and how I coach, and between a positional coach. The players are the individual players, and what they bring are the tactic. So if those players are more adaptable and can do more, that's the point of training for me. The more they can perceive, the more they can adapt, but still do that in their own way. The more we're going to be able to break down any type of positional structure or non-positional structure. That's the point.
Yeah.
It was that there about what tactics are. If everyone, and this is high volume stuff. So if you have a culture like the US, who everyone is defining tactics as a certain tactics board, leading, whether it's done on the pitch or whether it's done in a classroom, but this is the answer to this, the answer to that, and we'll call it tactical learning. If you kind of undersell what tactics is, which I think it's not really challenging the players. They're getting this really, really early, so they're disengaging later on. It's almost groupthink or a coaching community that we haven't looked of. All right, what's the game going to look like in 5 years? Forget about what the game will look like in 5 years. What's our players going to be interested in 5 years? Probably, like we talk about dropout as pressure, it's hard, no, boredom. Is anyone talking about boredom?
Honestly, yeah. Like that's the thing. And I've always played video games growing up, and I played quite a good level of video games when I was younger. And I just think we have so much to learn from game designers. This is going a bit off piece now, but we have so much to learn from game designers, because what do they give you? They give you a task. They kill this person, but then they just give you a sandbox, and you can do that in any way you want. That is what training should be like for me. It shouldn't be, repeat this so you can do this instruction later. It's like, that's not the point. The point is, can we give them a sandbox to play in? And then sort of adjust that constantly, so it's always ever changing, like the game. And I think that, I think that's probably the way forward for me. And through that, you'll always get the future player as opposed to what we currently have. That's the main point for me. What I'm always trying to develop, because we always talk about culture is really important, like where they're from, socioeconomical environment, and all this stuff. Like when you're when you hear coaches speak in academies, this is the stuff they're talking about, and I'll go, so what's the culture around here? And they can't answer. And the question's so important because they haven't set up an environment. You're only with the kids or the players at football when they come to you, and you haven't set up an environment to see what the culture is. You have no idea what it is because you're setting the culture. So if you're setting the culture and what they do and how they do it all the time, you're not going to know what they're interested in or what they want to do, or where football's heading. You'll never see it. You have to set up an environment where they can play. And this is not just young kids. I'm talking adults as well. They need to play, express. It's human expression. They need to be able to express themselves because you'll never know what's actually affecting them from the outside into how they play the game. You have to set up that environment where they can trial and error things and express themselves.
This podcast has turned into therapy for my kids' football experiences. But I was in my 9-year-old was at a tryout last night for a not a high level, and my 6-year-old, who hasn't kicked a ball in a year, decided that he was going to play with me on the outside. And now they love video games and they love drawing and they love their creatives, they're like their mum, they're creative people. But my 6-year-old, with his Baggio 10 shirt that I got him from Italy, is got his 2 little pugs. The training session hasn't started for my 9-year-old, so they're just messing around. And my 6-year-old is setting up a pitch for me to him to play 1v1. So I'm thinking, my 6-year-old thinks that this is football, but that's football over there, messing around, playing informally, what the 9-year-old's doing. Within 25 minutes, the 9-year-old is doing a tryout where it could have been 20 years ago, Jake. Dribble around a cone, dribble back, 5 lanes, 15 people in each one. You'd been horrified. Where my 6-year-old is gamifying a 1v1. He's turned the goals around. To score, you've got to score on the inside of a goal and on the outside of a goal. And then if the ball goes out, instead of throw-ins, you got to do 5 little exercises and all this here. And I've just completely flipped. I'm thinking, this is actually what coaching is over here, given like a young kid. Whereas my 9-year-old's bored out of his head over there. My point is, for the question, a lot of coaches listening to this will say, I actually agree that we've gone too far. But if I scale back, Jake, and do what the 6-year-old's doing for a bit of fun with Gary and scrap the 9-year-old, I have 50 parents that are going to complain or think that that's not what they've paid for. So how do we fight that one?
There's this really interesting topic on this, I think, where we think that the stuff I'm proposing and many others are proposing in the soccer world is it's unstructured, and that the coach just sits back and lets the environment take care of it. And that's not really the point. The point is actually the sessions are way more planned, way more detailed. But obviously, you can't let the kids know that because they'd be like, "What's going on?" It'd be too much for them. You have to scale it up, but and layer it. But yeah, the point is, mate, this is the thing. It takes people to really really care about development, really take a stand. If you don't want to do that, don't do it. I'm not saying you have to do that. Just for me, I just don't see if you want to create a business and it's about the business, do the business. That's fine. And parents will always go that way because they're not coaches. Like how much do they really know? Not as much as someone who's been in the game 20 years or whatever. Probably not. So they think that's right. There's always people who want to play soccer. It's the most played game in the world. So if you really care about what you're doing, take some players who aren't as talented as what people will say. Like when they're 9, who even cares at that point, really? But take some players that want to be there. That explain to the parents, we're doing it this way, and it looks completely different, and there is play involved. But show them, why is play so important? For millions of years, children have played to find out how to climb trees and stuff like that. There's no one standing there going, "Oh, put your right foot on there and grab." That's never happened, And I just think parents will go to a place they deem more professional because it looks closer to the real game. But if you have your own business and this is the way you want to go and you really care about the development of your players, you will be laughing in 5 to 6 years when those players eventually reach 11 aside or whenever we do it here. And they're so much more adaptable than these rigid players that have been on the product line, Um, so it's a long-term thing. And then by that time, and it might take 5 or 6 years, but other people are going to look in and go, they have loads of fun. They're really good. They win nearly every game. They play great football. All their players are going to pro teams. That's what you want. Every pro team at about, that I've worked at, about 13, 14, they let a load of players go and they bring in these players and the same conversation all the time. It cracks me up. Oh, why didn't we see them when they were 9? They weren't as good when they were 9, and that's what you were looking for. You're looking at currently who's the most effective. That's not what you should be recruiting. What you should be recruiting is how creative are these individuals to complete a task. Because as they grow and if they're intrigued by football, they're going to get better at it. They're gonna get better. They're gonna play more. They're gonna if you have adaptive training sessions that constantly change, dynamic, you know, these players with loads of problems to solve, these players are going to get better. And if you're looking for aesthetics, like dribbling through the cones, is all it is aesthetics, like their coordination at young ages. That's all you're looking at. But you think by the time that someone's 12 and they've played football for 6 years, they're not going to be coordinated. Of course they are. It's just impatience. And I think if you really care about development, you'll take the players that want to come and you'll build something from there. And that's how change will come about. It takes some people to be strong about it and care about it and then deep dive into it and know about it and explain to the parents gently and say, this is what we're doing. You don't have to be here. There's plenty of other places you can go, but this is what we believe in. This is the sort of stuff we want to do. And I think that's the only way it'll change. To continuously do the same thing over and over, pretend that you're different from everyone else, I think is madness. And I would say that's not going to help anyone.
Jake, I think that's actually what's happening. I think that people are, again, there's probably it's not better the devil you know, but risk of being different, risk of being judged, risk of not having control, not having, again, a business model that we have over here that may be risk of, a bit of volatility in the registration numbers or, whatever that is. But I think where we're looking at the future is this is what interests me is in the US marketplace. We talk about growing the game. We've talked about this for 20 years, but you've got to be really, really careful about growing the game and selling the game. I think business and football can go together because people will pay for quality, and I will always do it if it's food, music, art, sport. They'll pay to watch good stuff. But if we think that people are going to pay to play or watch a product that is tired and disengaged, and that's where I think even basketball over here, I don't know if you've been following any of that, like there's a big TV numbers are down, and the NBA is taking a bit of a battering, but then you've got women's basketball going HBO and play a 3v3 tournament that I watched every night last week because it's different and competitive and again has basketball there, but and I just wonder if our next generation of player is actually going to be again a little bit if coaches could be left behind a little bit on this, foreseeing what's coming.
Yeah, and I just think I think it's experience as well. You've got to get out and coach, and there'll be like an epiphany moment where, like, we've all seen it where players. I mean, I don't want to. I've worked at clubs where things have been the rigidity has been so strong. Stand high and wide. Every single goal kick, and you think how many goal kicks there are out 7 aside? There's a lot because they're all over the place, aren't they? And so like 7 aside, 9 aside, 11 aside, whatever it is, from goal kicks, high and wide wingers. That's all they've done for 8 years. And then I'm getting them and going, you're allowed to do something else. Like, so I remember being at that club and just being like, God, I was like drilling myself. How do I get creativity out of these players? I mean, it's the thing that I feel like I'm best at. Is that's what I bring as a coach, is getting creativity and this uniqueness out of players. And I just couldn't do it for a couple of months. I just couldn't get it out of them because it'd been so drilled into them, to the point where I had to start. Um, there's a lot of talk, and some of the stuff I do is around the constraints-led approach. There's a lot of talk around it about how um, you you can't ban someone from doing something. You should never say never do this. I had to do that. I had to say, right, you're not allowed to go high and wide. Off you go. And what actually that experience, although really tough, led me to how I develop players now, which is constantly changing environments. I'll have like three pitches in one, and every now and again I'll just change the pitch. So one will be really wide, one will be really long and narrow, one will only be like one half of the pitch, and do different shapes and stuff. But that will change, and I'll layer that as the time goes on, and just see if they can handle it. Which players can handle these tight spaces? Which ones can handle spaces in behind? What players can handle spaces? And then what you're doing is you're just observing, and you're saying, well, this player's really good at running in behind, probably because he's athletic and he just likes to run straight in behind, and he's really quick and he can score. So that's what he likes doing. Okay, but when the pitch changes to this short and narrow one, well, now he's really struggling. He can't get in behind. There's not enough space. So now I know where I need to develop him. Now I know what I need to push him into, for him to develop. Yeah, gone off on a tangent there, but
No, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. One of the things you said in a conversation we had the last time was about that constraint. About, I thought it was brilliant. The two centre backs couldn't have one centre back on each side of the goalkeeper.
Yeah, I got told off for that.
Talk about that, but talk about what that kind of. You don't have to go into the club dynamics of it, but talk about what that in a constraint does initially to the players, and then what happens over a period of time.
Well, what's great about that is in the game, and we were playing against Chelsea as well, so it's a really high level game. And in that game, I didn't put that constraint on. That emerged from the players, but it came from the training. It wasn't me going, both stand over there. The ball rolled back to the goalie, and I watched really clever player. He was playing centre back at the time, and he just looked around him, and he had I asked him after why he did it, but he went over and joined the other centre back on the right hand side, and I was like, okay, let's see where this goes, And they just played this awesome bit of football, and I've still got the clip; it's wicked. They just moved it. Midfielders were moving around. They moved it into midfielders, used the two centre, and the Chelsea press, the front three, had no idea what was going on, and the goalie moved out to like left centre back. And this is like in the 18-yard box, and then the goalie eventually gets it back after it comes back in the field and plays a ball forward, and we get a chance. And it was amazing. I asked him why he did that, and he said, "Oh, I just knew that they had like a set press, like they had triggers. So I just thought, if I go over here, what are they gonna? They're gonna mess up. They're gonna leave someone free. Like, we always use the goalie as extra anyway, so and it was amazing." But I will say that came from the player's very, very good anyway. But that came from me not restricting him in training. There's so many times where that would have been stamped out, and it was stamped out, unfortunately. But there's so many times in training where that would be stamped out. Oh no, you're left-footed. You stay on the left-hand side. When the ball goes back to the goalie, you're here. You're here. I didn't do that. I just gave them different scenarios, and that was when I started doing the different pitch areas. So what he actually was doing was making the pitch smaller and narrower and only playing down the right-hand side. But the team had to just play in that area. And because Chelsea was still spread out waiting for their pressing triggers, they just couldn't figure it out. But we'd done that in training so many times, not on purpose. But they just were like, this is the situation, this is how we're going to play. It was amazing. So yeah, that was a really good example of when it works well, for sure.
I love it. Argument against, going back to the game model, as the game becomes a little bit more pre-planned, almost like a set piece of a goal, like we're just chatting about goal kicks, and we're seeing teams today that, again, at the first team level are even some managers talking about it. Kieran McKenna's talked about a couple of times about patterns to get out against certain presses. So it's where I didn't think we were. I actually thought player intelligence would move to, but we talked about before air. I seen it at the weekend. Kind of counter movements, Bielsa. Is there space for that though? In the if you're looking at getting out of something, having set routines, set patterns within that, can that live in a game model that's not too rigid?
I mean, it does. So they can't. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist. I'm not saying it doesn't exist or like it. I am saying it shouldn't, because prescribing, again, the whole perception I have of development and football in general is that I want the players to perceive, and then for opportunities to break down the other team to emerge. For them to take those opportunities or deny them, it's up to them. They don't have to take those opportunities. But then I will ask them, oh, you looked at that gap and then you didn't take it. So what was the thought process there? There's no right or wrong, because you have to say that to players when you first with them as well, because they're thinking, oh, what does he want me to say? You just say, there's no right or wrong. I'm just interested because you looked at that gap a few times, and then they'll tell you, oh, I just thought so and so wasn't in a good enough space to receive it, so I just turned back round. All right, okay. At least you saw it. That's the whole point. Is I want them to perceive what the opposition are doing and what spaces are there, and they will change all the time, regardless if you're playing against a positional team or not. And I just want them to go, oh, I can pop in there and get the ball, or oh, I can come back here and play a pass through that, or I'm really good at driving with the ball. I might be a left wing back. I'm going to come take it off the centre back and just drive through that gap. But there's no reason why that shouldn't be. That's development for me. There's no reason why that shouldn't be involved at the top level. I think when it comes to patterns, the issue I have, and at the top level, when you coach against really good coaches who can see these patterns, they last 20 minutes. So you look really good. One of my favourite ones, I watched De Zerbi against Sean Dyche a couple of years ago, and Dyche was just at Everton, just gone there, and he'd obviously watched De Zerbi's team play. And I remember everyone going, oh, yeah, we're going to kill Everton, And we went and watched live. And he basically said, centre-backs are going to wait till you press. You do not press. Like, there's no press today. And he just got them literally to sit in the 18-yard box. I mean, the players were coming up to the edge of the 18-yard box. But then he had 4 or 5 really athletic players, like your Iwobis, and they would just get the ball. And all that space that was left behind, I mean, Lewis Dunk couldn't keep up. It was just 5-1, 5-0. It just kept doing it. So he said, go on, De Zerbi, play your patterns if you want. He couldn't play them. He just couldn't play them. So it works. And I think that's a great example. And I don't want to, he's probably a much greater manager and coach than me, I'm sure he is. But he only lasts a couple of seasons at each club. Because if you're playing against top tacticians, people who can observe the positional model that you're playing or whatever model you're playing, they'll see that if those patterns are similar all the time, and De Zerbi had a lot of different versions of how to play out, but then you come up against a Sean Dyche who's just great at stopping, and what do? Now your whole game model's ruined. Now we don't know what to do. Oh, hopefully Matoma does something. That's what it becomes. Oh, hopefully one of the really creative 1v1 players does something, and that gets us out of trouble. But you can't do that. They've got man mountains in the box that just clear the ball all the time. They got really athletic players. So you're not dynamically in tune with the game. And so the patterns are great for about 5 minutes against top opposition. And I think if you're against a decent coach, you just can't do it unless your players are just superior. And like at Barcelona, where Messi and Dani Alves were told not to pass to each other on the right hand side, and they did it anyway. And there's some fantastic clips of them doing those 1-2s that they shouldn't be doing, And Iniesta he plays positional, but then he doesn't because he's so good, So these players that are so good that just break it and find solutions anyway, unless you have that. But the problem is that from so young, they're not allowed to do those things. That is it's not happening anymore. I'm not seeing it happen anymore. And it's not just the top level. I'm just using them as examples, but in academy specifically. it's quite dull, you know.
Yeah, yeah. And even I think people think that, I mean, I've watched a lot of football. To look at, doing scouting reports of professional teams, and you're looking at A, B, C, D patterns, and actually, like, if it happens 3 times, it's a lot. But in the last 15, 20 minutes of a game, because of the level of fatigue and the subs, it's not worth analysing anyway from a scouting perspective, because nothing's really set. And I think that's where, I think, going back to how I think there's a big piece on how coaches consume football today, I think is a big problem. Because if you think that the patterns are going to get you, and I actually, again, no problem in saying that actually I would be more structure. I'd be more structure than freedom. But I think the blend and understanding it is that, in my eyes, is that understanding who you are. And like, yeah, I'm probably holding this at a 9 out of 10 at the minute. I probably need to let this go down to a 6. Whereas I think the coach believing that they are, what was the Fluminense coach, the relationism?
Denise.
I'm Denise. When you're really a bit more Jack Charlton.
Yeah, I see a lot about that sort of relationism at the moment. I think it's great, but I also think some of the stuff I'm looking at around that is you just get your players close together, and it almost becomes from certain things I've seen, certain models where they've tried to use it, it almost becomes positional, but in a really tight space. That's not really. I'm sure that's not what he meant when he wrote. It was Jamie Hamilton wrote relationism. But I think the point is that you know your players and they relate to each other's strengths and weaknesses. Not that they have to play in a tight space, that they can play in a tight space and they can play wide as well. Like, let's not go from it's full width to the small, like the least width. That's not the point. The point is that they can do all these things depending on the individuals you have. I think that's
yes.
Yeah.
I done the Denise interview with Jamie Hamilton a couple of years ago, and I got an email afterwards from a coach that was saying, listen, I'm really enjoying this. And he said that here's my solution. This is what I'm going to try and do, is have a structured game model, but in the final third, let them do what they want. And I was like, but everyone's doing that. Like, I'd actually rather you do the opposite. I'd actually rather you say, up into the final third, you can do what you want. But in the final third, I need a runner to the front post, back post. I need someone in the penalty spot. So flip it. But I think, again, what my point is that I think we rely a lot on leaving it to the coach awareness piece, which we don't do a great job of being aware, self-aware. And we all think that we're way more flexible and attack-minded, and well, we really are. Like, we all want control of our lives. We want the control of our finances. Like, that's what we're getting today. Life is setting up to have less risk and more control. And then we're thinking that football, we're going to do this, but that's my biggest fear with. As we move towards, like, okay, we've the systems, it's too much, tactics, even from me, it's too much. But how do we get it away from the lack of awareness that, like, you're just doing what coaches have done for the last 10 years and calling it different?
Yeah. I think I've always questioned everything anyway. It's how I was brought up. So maybe harder for people who weren't brought up in that way, maybe. But I think you're old enough at some point to start questioning things, and not everything is what everyone's told you. And I remember things growing up where, do you remember you weren't allowed to put the light on in the car while someone was driving? Absolute nonsense. I believed that till I was about 25. I remember my ex going, I remember going, no, you can't put the light on. I'm driving. And she was like, you still have eyes. What are you talking about? And it's just little things like that. And there's some other stuff as well where I just started going, been told all this stuff, and I just don't. It's not true, is it? And there comes a point where you have to learn to break free from that and look at what else there is, and that can only come internally from each individual. But there's no magic wand I can wave and everyone just goes, pure development. I can't do that.
100%, 100%. I'm actually reading Billy Connolly's book at the minute. I had no idea. Like my dad always loved Billy Connolly, and I've tried to do his stand up, but I can't get into. Like I like him, but I can't get into him. And
Mm.
then I just saw his book was on the one of the recommended reading. I thought, you know what? I'll lead this in the plane. It's a guy that's like it's coaches should read it. It's like really hard upbringing, really difficult, but a structured time. 60s, 70s, more hippie approach, and more like saw so much beauty in going into doing a bit of the what do you call it, banjo. And then when he got into the banjo, he could write funny songs, and then he could set them up and close them by talking. So he became a comedy act. And I always thought comedy was just you can tell jokes, but he found a different way into comedy. Then his dress sense, and then his whole skit is about observation. So he's super hypersensitive to what's going on around him, which means he can relate to people. And the whole thing is just a work of art. And I think people as coaches, I read it and I think, God, if coaching could be like this, coaching could be like this. It could be
Yeah,
something where
I
you
agree.
just have, but we're so tight and we're so worried. It's where I think we actually need to do another one of these where it's like, how does the environment actually look to do
Yeah,
this on a training one?
yeah,
Because I think I do think, and it might just be me, and I was like, but I laugh at your light analogy and think I'm doing the same thing with my kids and with my life. I'm doing the exact same thing, thinking, why have I always done this?
yeah, yeah. Honestly, I think the main thing I would lead coaches with is if you're interested in what we're talking about, um, is rather than looking at it from how do I win football matches, it's you have to fall in love with human expression. You have to really you have to really care about bringing that out in someone. Like, and there is it's going to sound a bit philosophical and a bit floaty now, but you have to like find joy in what makes people unique. And if you can't take a step back and do that, you can't work like this. So yeah, it's important to be yourself. If you're not that sort of person, you're really structured and stuff, that's fine. Um, but I would step back and just go, is this the only way? Like, are my players really developing? Am I too scared to actually ask them? How many coaches ask, you know, did you enjoy it today? It's horrible, horrible feeling. I've had someone come up to me at my last club and say, that pitch was too big, too big. And my initial reaction was, yeah, it's meant to be like that. And I went, what have I just said? He's just given me some, he didn't enjoy it. So I think there's a lot to gain from football is a sport, yes, but it makes people feel joy. Why does it make people feel joy? It's not just winning a game. Everyone talks about identity, don't they? But your identity and your culture come from your players. I really think it comes from the players. It does come from the fans, absolutely. But if the players aren't exciting the fans, there's absolutely no way you're going to get the culture you really want in that stadium. There's no way. So the culture has to come from the players. So then, if your whole thing is looking at how players express themselves, human expression, individuality, and your training environment should allow them to do that. And that's how we're going to get special and unique players and get better in the national teams and have our leagues perform better and in all the attendance stuff and all that. Because people want to have a homegrown player that is special and better than everyone else's homegrown player because it comes from your neighborhood. He comes from your neighborhood. He's the best new talent in the league, probably in the world. He's going to go off and win us a World Cup. That's what people get excited about. They don't get excited about it looking like chess because it's not chess. And if you want to play chess, go play chess. But don't mess with human interaction and human expression. I think that's where it's gone. I think we just need to rewind and go, what do we actually care about here? You know,
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant way to finish. I think a lot of clubs would say the idea of producing that player and sending that player to Europe and making a difference in this landscape is a high motivator. But I think that in it, the biggest thing I've got out of this is like it's the process. Like you said, the passion is not in the outcome. The passion is in the process of what that you can't do that without actually caring and setting up an environment for that player to thrive. Right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's a better way of putting it. Sure.
No, fantastic. Jake, thank you so much. This has been amazing. We need to do it again.
Yeah, it's been really good. Enjoyed it.